Welcome to this podcast about the fifth pillar of the mentorship, the coaching program that I offer, that is based on 6 different pillars. And today I want to talk with you about the fifth pillar, which is devotion. And I've been looking forward to recording this podcast. At the same time, before starting just now, I felt a bit hesitant or a bit unsure because basically, how can one give words to a thing such as devotion? And I want to do it right, in the sense that I want to try to transmit what devotion is about, what it means to me, and why I feel that it's of such a great interest and importance for everyone, actually. So what I will be doing in this episode, as I do in all of my episodes actually, is that I'm gonna take examples from my own life, maybe some inspiration from the people that I work with, and combine all these things to give you an idea of what it means to me, how it plays a role in my life, so that you can translate it to your own life. And the funny thing is that the first pillars that I've spoken about with regard to this mentorship have been unconditional love, joy, leadership, followed by the bridge. And I love that it's called the bridge, because it's the most abstract thing ever. What do we mean when we talk about the bridge? There's an episode dedicated to that. But with this episode, the bridge, we literally also made a bridge from topics, pillars that are quite straightforward, in the sense that everyone knows at least a little bit what I talk about when I say the word joy, or when I say the word leadership, or even when I say unconditional love. We have some sort of idea with it. It's words that are often used, especially also in our Western society. It's nothing strange or new. And with the episode of the bridge, we literally made a bridge from topics that are more straightforward, as I said, to the last 2 pillars that are just beyond the rational, beyond the logic, beyond maybe also things that you are used to hearing or used to talk about, which in this case is devotion. And next time I will be speaking about clarity in a more abstract kind of way. And so because this topic of devotion is something that it's just hard to put in words, it's beyond rationality, it's beyond something that makes sense to most of us, I really want to ask you to approach this episode with a sense of wonder and openness. I want to ask you to not approach it with just your mind in a way that you're going to dissect every word that I speak, and that you're going to try... what you hear in the background is my dog, of course. She's always there walking around. I want you to not approach it with a sense of I have to understand what's happening, and I have to you don't even have to make sense of things. I really want to ask you to approach it with a sense of openness and curiosity, so that you can receive whatever you need to receive from this. And I honestly believe, and I know from my own experience, that not all information is received through words, but sometimes on different levels. So by listening with an open attitude, with an open type of energy, you will receive more than what your ears are hearing, so to say. There's more happening here than just words. But it can only happen if you open yourself up. And the way you can open yourself up is by allowing yourself to not understand everything, not wanting to understand everything, and to just be curious. Just be curious. And I know you can do it, because it's a natural state of being, actually, for us humans. So devotion is the 5th pillar of the mentorship, and the beauty of these pillars is that they're all interconnected. They all exist simultaneously. They all impact each other. There's no just one pillar responsible for one area of your life. They all have to do with all the areas of our lives. And devotion is one of those topics that came to me personally I think a few years ago it became more apparent. It's always been there in the sense that I'm someone, and I notice my mother, for example, has the very same thing. We're very easily touched by beauty, whether it's music or whether it's an animal or whether it's flowers. We're very easily touched by the beauty of it, and it can touch us in such a way that listening to a piece of music it can just bring us to tears. Or I remember sitting in the garden of my parents and I see this little robin, this little beautiful bird, and the beauty and the simplicity of it touched me so that it overwhelms me, and so I cry. And for me, this is one example of devotion in the sense of being devoted to beauty. Because what devotion means is that, in fact, it's not about you. Devotion means putting yourself aside and therefore making space for something bigger that's anyway there, but that you might not have been paying attention to, or you might not have been aware of. But by putting the self aside, you open up to something bigger, and this allows you to experience life in a different way than what you've maybe been used to so far. So this little example of forgetting the self for a moment and being so captivated by the beauty of something so simple allows you to feel a sense of love and beauty and wonder that you might not feel in other moments when you are, for example, very much in your head or trying to understand and explain. There's this beautiful quote, I think it's in the beginning of the book, I don't remember the name of the book, it's from Eckhart Tolle, I think it's his most famous book. In the introduction he says something about the beauty of a sunset is not because you try to understand the sunset. You just sit there and you are with the sunset. You're overcome by its beauty, and that's why it's beautiful. That's why you enjoy it. That's why it touches you. Not because you're thinking about why it is beautiful and what's happening with the rays and how it reflects and blah. It just is, and therefore you experience it. So this is another example of putting the self in sense of the thoughts that we have, the identifications that we have, the explanations that we have, putting those aside so that we get to experience something greater than what we thought may be possible or what we experienced before. And I see this also with the clients that I work with. Most of them are devoted, whether they realize it or not, to something in their lives as well. I work with someone who is a musician in a quite big and famous orchestra here in Europe, and he is completely devoted to the music. He's devoted to the beauty of it. And that's the reason why he wants to play in the best way possible, because he wants the audience to experience the beauty in the same way that he does, or maybe even more than he does. He's so devoted to the music that he wants to practice every day, that he wants to become better, and that he's just so in love with it. And as we've been working together for a long time, obviously when you work in such a high-performing job, you will deal with things such as perfectionism, perfectionism, and maybe fear of failure. And it's these aspects, perfectionism, fear of failure, that limit you in such a annoying kind of way, because they obviously impact the way that you perform and they take away the joy completely. But by connecting yourself again with the devotion that you have, so in his case the devotion for the music, the devotion for the beauty of the music, it helped him to instead focus on that, which helped him to perform even better than he had performed before. So this is a very practical example of how devotion can actually help you perform better in life, or in general how it can help you enjoy life more, how it can help you to experience life in a deeper sense. I have another client who is devoted to art. I have clients who became a mother and they're devoted to their child. I have clients who are just devoted to the well-being of humans in general, or well-being of every living creature on this planet. And for me, devotion is, the tricky thing with talking about devotion in the Western society is that we often, I think we've made some sort of weird connection that devotion means submissive or submission, that devotion has to do per se with religion, that devotion has to do with maybe even like a cult or something, with putting something or someone above yourself and therefore lowering yourself. And to me, this is not the meaning of devotion. Yes, it's about putting something else above yourself, but in such a way that it's not limiting your experience of life, but expanding your experience of life. It's not about diminishing yourself because you are worthless or not good enough or not as worthy as the thing or the person that you're putting above yourself. It's because you see that in the big picture of things, you are but a speck of dust. And acknowledging this is one of the most liberating things you can do for yourself. So putting yourself aside, I love speaking about this also because there's this trend going on, I think also in the coaching world, and I have also been guilty to it some years ago, is that we always focus on, make sure that you put yourself first. You are your first priority, and then you can take care of other people, or then you can devote yourself to someone else. And I think it's important to understand that there's a nuance in this. To me, there's nothing more beautiful than putting yourself aside for the sake of someone else or something else. This is the essence of volunteering, for example. Does this mean that you should be destroying yourself? Does this mean that you should starve yourself just for the sake of feeding other people? It's not what I'm saying, because in the end, it's about expanding your experience of life. And expanding your experience of life comes with also investigating and experiencing the limits that you have built up for yourself. So coming back to the very extreme example of, does it mean that you need to starve yourself and only focus on feeding other people? No, that's not what it means. But it could mean, for example, that when, let's say, you participate in volunteering in a project, or you help out with a group of people, that maybe you don't put the focus on, okay, I have to eat my lunch by 12 o'clock because I always eat my lunch by 12 o'clock. But you start to experience that when you put the focus somewhere else instead of on yourself, that actually you're fine if you eat your lunch by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's not about starving yourself or destroying yourself in that sense, but understanding that the limits that you have created are in fact limitations, and that it's okay to bring some flexibility in them. And this is the very essence of what it means to evolve as a person. This is what I talk about when I speak about things like breaking free from your karma. There's a book called Karma by Sadhguru, which I highly recommend because it explains beautifully what the meaning of karma is. And it's not you do good and good things happen. It's a lot more intricate than that. But karma is the things that we have gathered in all of our lives that now are sort of like a structure that we have built around ourselves and that limit us in such a way. For example, things like I have to eat my lunch by 12, or I must always sleep 8 hours, or whatever things that we came up with, or in whatever ways in which we try to avoid being uncomfortable, that in fact limit us from experiencing life in a more expansive way. And one of the most intense examples that I ever experienced when it comes to the power of devotion or putting others before yourself is when a couple of years ago I joined a very intense meditation program for 4 days. It's called Bhava Spandana. It's a program in which you go through certain processes that are highly intense, and leading to, and just in short, leading to a completely new experience of life. I've never ever experienced anything like it before, and it changed my life completely. So as you go through these processes, there is a certain process that is just so intense, physically also so intense, that at one point I think everyone in the room was thinking, I cannot. Like, if I keep doing this, I might crash. Or maybe I heard people thinking they thought they were going to die because it was so intense. Obviously, no one was going to die, and it is all completely safe. It was just to show that physically it was very intense, something that none of us was used to. And so these thoughts, these limiting thoughts come up like, oh, I cannot do this, or it's so uncomfortable, I cannot handle this, la 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 la. So you go through this process and you understand, like, actually there's more that I can handle than I thought I could handle. And as you go through it, you understand that, okay, there are these limitations, and when I loosen them up, I allow myself to expand, and I experience new things in life. It was incredible. So I went beyond something that I thought I was physically possible of, to then experience something completely new, and to think like, wow, I didn't just give 100%, but I gave 150%. And I reached my very limit also. This is the maximum that I could have put into this process also. It was great. And then the funny thing was that I think a few months later, maybe half a year later, I went to India to spend a month in the ashram, where then at one point I got the opportunity, it was such a blessing, I got the other opportunity to volunteer for the same program that I had participated in before. And the funny thing, when you volunteer for such a program, you do the program yourself, and on top of that, your role, so to say, is to help the people who are participating to give that 150%. Because you've gone through it yourself, you know what's waiting on the other side. You want nothing less than having them experience at least that. So whatever it is that you're doing in those 4 days, you want it to happen for them. You give your all so that they push themselves to that 150%, so that they can experience that as well. So at one point we approached this certain process again, and of course every one of us knew, like, okay, this is going to be intense. And as we were participating with the participants, I started to realize that what I thought was my limit, this 150%, turned out to just be the beginning of my ability. Because as I was standing next to the participants who were doing it for the first time, my motivation, my love, my everything that I wanted for them, because I wanted this to happen for them so much, allowed me to go beyond this 150% so that I could push them to go there as well. And afterwards I was just flabbergasted, just to show that there's these limitations that we think that they're the ultimate limit. Probably they're not. And to show that when you put yourself aside and you don't do it for yourself, but just because you want it so deeply for the other, the limitations are just destroyed. The self is destroyed. And not only are you then able to enable an experience for another person, you yourself can experience even something beyond what you thought was already beyond. And this to me opened up so much freedom, so much just, it was such an aha moment of, okay, this is what it means to be a volunteer. This is what it means to put the self aside. This is what it means to be devoted to something or someone else. And this is also the reason why devotion has become a part of my life, and why it's and therefore a part of the mentorship, because the mentorship is just a reflection of me, basically, because I have experienced the beauty of devotion. I want this to happen so badly for you as well, that it had to be a pillar in this mentorship. It had to be something that at least in one way or another we will work with, or we will speak about, or we will experience. And so devotion comes in many ways. I just gave a few examples of clients who are devoted to music or art or well-being, or in my case, in that program, it was the experience of the other participants, or in the work that I do, my devotion is towards my client. I want this to happen for them. I want them so badly to flourish that, you know, I'm here. I show up for them because I want this for them. And it's good to realize that devotion doesn't mean that because it's about someone else, you're not allowed to enjoy it or anything. Not at all. I love my work. I absolutely love my work. It brings me so much joy, and sometimes I cannot even grasp the luck that I have that I get to work with the people that I work with. So it's not about, again, it's not about destroying yourself, and it's also not about putting yourself aside and holding yourself back from any joy or any pleasant experience in life. Devotion doesn't mean suffering. Devotion simply means acknowledging that there's something, someone out there that's grander than you in that moment or in general. So in that moment, it could be the client, or it could be the music or the other participant. In general, if we take a look, and this is also something that you have to realize with all of the pillars, they work on different levels. They work on your personal life, they work on your professional life, they work on a larger scale, they work on, let's say, a universal level as well. And with devotion, it's the same. If you take a step back and you see that, you know, what are we in the end on this planet? Like, if I die tomorrow, I won't be bothered by it, but I know the people that care for me will be bothered by it. But in the same time, you know, the world goes on. In that sense, I won't be missed that much, yes, by the people who care for me, but the world will keep on spinning, you know, the sun's still gonna rise tomorrow, and that's it. So who are we, or who am I really on the grand scale of things? I just called it a speck of dust. Or recently I saw this image of a drop of water on a spider web, which I also really like. Just a tiny thing that, yes, it can have an impact, but at the same time, it's also not really that much. And understanding that there's something out there that's larger than you will help you to also see your own worries, your own struggles, your own drama, your own mind, and your own emotions into perspective. Because when you take a step back and you watch yourself worry about things, it's actually really funny. It's actually really funny. So in that sense, it can help to see that on the grand scale of things, you know, what am I but a speck of dust, and there's something larger out there. So what is this thing that's larger out there? And this is something that I've also in the last 2 years or so have become, I've experienced it more and more, that it's just incredible. I don't have any other words for it. When you take this step back, so you not only zoom out from your own life and you put your drama and things into perspective, but also if you zoom in to what life actually is. And when I speak about life, I don't necessarily mean your life with your dramas and your stories and your relationships and your experiences, but just life, the same life that's within me and this plant behind me and my dog that's somewhere in this room. Life, this energy life. What is this life actually? And isn't it miraculous? And don't I just want the exact same as this plant? Isn't this plant also just from the moment it sprouts, just growing and growing towards the light? And doesn't it just want to expand and grow? And isn't that exactly what I'm doing? Isn't that what we all long for? And yes, people get distracted because they think that they want a second car and a bigger house. But in the end, what we want is expansion. And we want to expand in such a way that basically we explode and nothing is left. So when you start to see that there's so many connections between my life, this life, the life with the person that I meet on the street, and when you start to see how all these things are actually connected and how they impact each other, to me, in the last year, I've started to see everything as a sort of web where everything is interconnected. And funnily enough, recently I saw a video where a connection was made between the yogic approach to how the universe is seen, as well as quantum physics, which is just a wonderful topic. And basically what is said in the yogic culture is that just as with quantum physics, with its string theory, and that everything is connected, and that one thing can be in two places at the same time, or it can be in different states at the same time, everything is happening simultaneously. And when one thing changes, the other thing is impacted by it simultaneously. And all these things, like, you cannot possibly start to understand how it works. It's so intricate, it's so intelligent, it's so absurdly beautiful that I personally can have nothing but the most respect and awe for what I call existence. And I give it the word existence. I know friends of mine, they would call it God or Shiva, or maybe creation or the universe or spirit, or whatever word you want to give it. I like to call it creation because it's not so personified, and there's not really a load on this word. It's just everything around me, including me, is creation. So when I have nothing but respect for the grandness of the creation, it means that me included, because I am the creation, the creator and the creation at the same time. And so I wrote down a few sentences a few days ago that I just want to read out loud here, because I feel that they reflect very well with what I mean when I speak about this being in awe, which is that once you see the divinity in it all, you cannot help but surrender and trust, because you understand that this existence far exceeds your own ability to plan, control, manage, and understand. And this is also the reason why devotion can be such a tricky subject to many people, because it requires you to surrender and trust. It requires you to not just try to understand, because you won't understand. And you won't be able to manage it, and you won't be able to control it. And as soon as we cannot control things, we get scared. That's what humans do. So it makes sense that devotion can come across as a scary thing, because it feels like you're giving away your power, you're giving away your control. But my love, you were never in control to begin with. And when you see that, when you start to become a witness to the grandness of things, you can actually lean back and you can start to see the game, and you can start to see how the strings are maybe connected, and you can start to understand that this whole web, this whole construction of things wants nothing but the best for you, and that the very essential movement of this construction is one of expansion. And the cool thing is that, you know, in physics they also see it, that the universe is always expanding. This is the movement of the universe, and I deeply feel that, you know, the universe is a reflection of what happens within us and the other way around. So whatever's happening within you, it will always be multiplied, it will always expand. So if there's a lot of fear within you, it will expand, it will be multiplied. If there's a lot of gratitude in you, it will be multiplied. If there's a lot of a sense of lack, of not enough, of sort of this cramp, it will be multiplied. And when you start to see this, then you know that actually, you know, I always say the universe has got your back, and not in the sense that it only wants what's good for you, because I think we have an idea of what is good for us, but it's not necessarily what is good for us, because we can only think until a certain point. We can only think until what we think is possible based on what we've experienced in the past, or based on what we've seen with other people. So our imagination is actually quite limited. So it's not in the sense that it wants the best for you, that it fits within your framework of what is best for you, but it wants expansion. It will follow what is already there, and what you can do is nurture yourself. So you bring in the gratitude, you bring in the lightness, you bring in the joy, and it will be multiplied. And what it essentially means, it wants the best for you, is that it is expansion. The urge, the longing of the inner core of your being, let's call it a soul, whatever you want to call it, is the longing for expansion and eventually explosion. So this is what it's going for. And in this way you are supported. And of course there's all other sorts of things happening, and support systems and stuff that I don't want to dive too deep into, because it just adds more stories, and that's not always necessary. But the reason why I'm saying this is just because I want you to have a taste of the amazement and the sometimes disbelief that I have for this creation. And because I have this sense of awe, because I have this devotion, it makes my life so much, it makes the experience of my life so much richer, more joyful, more intense. It gives me a why of, why do I want to wake up in the morning? Why do I want to do this work? Why do I want to spend 1.5 hours in the morning doing my practice? Because I know that all of this will help me to either experience this existence more intensively, or because it will help others to experience this existence more intensively. Difficult sentence. And that is my devotion. This is my devotion to the existence. And this gives me the why. This gives me a drive. This gives me joy. This gives me moments where I just cannot help but fall down on my knees and cry in gratitude and overwhelm, because it's just beyond. So as you can tell, this topic is just one of, it's just something that you feel. It's something that I gave words to it in the best I could. I hope that some of it landed with you, some of it reached you. And mostly what I just want to say to you is to, let this vibe, open yourself up to absorb a bit of this vibe. See if it maybe touches you a little bit. If it doesn't, it's okay, And at the same time, an invitation to see, where in your life are you already actually devoted? Or where in your life might it be wonderful to take a pause and zoom in a little bit? Not so much on your thoughts, but maybe even on your body, because don't get me started on the miracle of this body, people. If you zoom into the processes that are happening in here, it's just crazy. Or maybe you want to zoom in. I love watching ants, for example. Maybe you want to zoom into nature and just really see what's happening there. And automatically you will have some sense of devotion in your life. And that's all I want for you.